Protesters in Israel are staging what they call a national day of resistance to dictatorship, rallying against the government's plan to overhaul the judicial system. This scene unfolding earlier in Tel Aviv. Thousands of protesters are on the streets across the country today, blocking main intersections and bringing traffic to a halt. In Jerusalem, reservists from the Israeli military used sandbags and barbed wire to block the offices of a conservative think tank. Chris Brown is in Jerusalem, and he joins us now from the middle of one of those protests. Chris, tell us about where you are today and what you're seeing.
Well, Natasha, we're actually right in front of the Israeli Knesset, the parliament here. As you can see, there's probably a couple of hundred protesters carrying the blue and white colors of Israel. This group here, largely academics, some pretty bright people, a lot of doctors, scientists, as well as a lot of students. And it really just speaks to the size, I guess, of what they're calling pro-democracy protests here. You mentioned some of the other things going on in other parts of the country, but there's been like a protest flotilla that's been happening off the coast as well. Farmers, people from kibbutzes. So this is a really huge undertaking. And the whole point of today isn't so much to just get numbers out, although they are doing that. It's really just to demonstrate, you know, the importance that so many people here attach to these reforms that are going through Parliament, reforms that are being pushed, some people say rammed through by the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, a government that these folks would characterize as far right. And the thing that they're most upset about is changes to the Supreme Court, changes that would weaken it, changes that would allow the government to potentially override decisions that weren't very popular. So you can imagine, for example, if you're a woman or if you're gay, you might be concerned about some decision that might, impact your equality. And that's not to mention, for example, reservists who are also part of this group, concerned that perhaps the court might, the parliament might order them to do something they don't want to do. They might go to the court to kind of get a reprieve, and potentially that option may not be there in the future.
Chris, as we're speaking to you, I just want to bring the audience in on the images that they're looking at on their screen. This is a live shot, a different vantage point of one of the protests. What you've seen is a dramatic group of people being confronted by essentially a wall of security. There are police on motorcycles, there are police on foot, and we saw police on horseback pushing the crowd back. And we've seen scenes like this before in other cities. We've in fact seen it even in this country, in Ottawa. There's that wall of policing to push a group that is protesting back. So clearly tensions are high. Seemingly things are peaceful in terms of these protests, but not so much the scene in terms of the context in which all of this is taking place, which is the ongoing battles between the Israeli settlers and the Palestinians. What are you hearing about that?
Well, there's certainly a nexus between what you're seeing here and the upsurge, the uptick in violence between Israeli settlers in particular and Palestinians. Something like 70 Palestinians have been killed in 2023 alone by Israeli security operations. 11 Israelis have been killed. So obviously terrible losses on both sides, but some of this we haven't seen before. We've seen instances of one instance in particular. 2 Israeli men were killed by a Palestinian, and not long after, in the village of Hawara, Israeli settlers basically took their own vigilante justice in hand, went through, rampaged the town, destroyed property, destroyed homes and so forth. And then the country's finance minister appeared to condone it and say it was okay. So this is the level of tension that we're seeing. Just today, there were 3 more Palestinians killed in a government action. There were 6 or 7 the other day. So really, you're seeing an entire country coming to the boiling point.
I want to stick with you one more moment, Chris, if I may, because, again, we've got these images on our screen of a live protest taking place, and the numbers of both the protesters and the police and security presence on the ground are really, really quite astounding. And we've been reporting for weeks that these are some of the biggest protests Israel has ever seen. You mentioned that tension, you mentioned that boiling point, and we've seen what lengths the Israeli government and military and security forces will go to protect their interests. Do you feel that things could get dangerous and potentially violent within Jerusalem in their internal political conflict that we're witnessing right now?
You know, we haven't seen violence here. There have been some 14 arrests. That's the most recent number across the country. There are police on horseback, but, you know, no tear gas. We've not kind of gone to that level. And I think people really don't want to see that. But what they really are hoping is this combination of protests on so many different fronts in so many different cities. And for so many weeks now, this is 10 weeks, that along with international pressure being put on the Netanyahu government from outside, that might make the difference. Benjamin Netanyahu is not here in Jerusalem right now. He actually had a meeting delayed by the protesters at Ben Gurion Airport with the U.S. Defense Secretary. He's heading off to Italy to meet its right-wing leader. He's not welcome too many places in Europe these days, but Italy is one place that's welcoming him.
Okay, Chris Brown in Jerusalem, live shot of Tel Aviv on your screen. Thank you so much.